Hey everyone, welcome to Between a Left and a Hard Place. I'm Catherine Devine, I'm a journalist, I'm a law student, and I'm a member of Gen Z.
Hey folks, I'm Dean Charles, your resident boomer, businessman, and we're gonna see if we can get along. See if we can see what we both think. See if there's any place we can find common ground and what the future holds for this great country, the United States of America.
That's the big question. The
Yeah.
news this week, pretty salacious. Al Saeed came out on top in the Michigan race against Haley Stevens. Super narrow, is like 48.5% to 47.5% or something like that.
Yeah.
Initial reactions, Dean, you weren't very surprised. I wasn't either.
Well, the prediction markets and the polls had El Said way ahead. The prediction markets, before the election, he was, huge favorite. And the polls, he was between 10 and 15%. So everybody got it wrong in that respect because it came down, it was just 1 point. It was really close, wound up being really close. El Said concerns me. I'm your boomer, moderate, centrist kind of Democrat, and he concerns me. He does come out and say the right things. He says he's a capitalist, right? As opposed to Mondami, who said, "No, I'm a socialist. I'm going to run New York as a Democratic Socialist of America." Mondami said that, and he does. You can't bag on him for it because he told everybody what he was going to do. But El Said says, "No, I'm a capitalist. I am not a socialist." He also, came out to the Jewish people of Michigan and said, "I'm totally for equality and fairness, and I will treat Jewish children like I treat my own daughters and people of the Jewish faith. Being against Israel has nothing to do with you being Jewish." He's given speeches like that. Whether he's believable, whether to believe him or not, is another story. I think that's why he was able to, win the Democratic primary. If he had said like Mondami, "I'm a Democratic Socialist, I'm gonna act accordingly," I don't think he would have won. But
Yeah.
he did,
It's Michigan.
yeah,
Yeah, it's Michigan. It's a purple state. Like certain things aren't going to fly there that are going to
right.
fly in New York. But I think I was pretty convinced by his performance and his messaging.
Yeah, well, but at the same
I
time, he still hangs out with Hassan Piker, and his affiliation. Some of the affiliations are definitely questionable at best.
Yeah, I'm
And
not so sure if that's an affiliation or more just, leveraging like different outlets to reach new audiences because
well,
candidates on
that's the
both sides of the aisle
question.
do that all the time, all the time. So I
Yeah,
think it's hard to draw a
that's the
conclusion. But
question.
yeah, that is the question. The one thing I will say is that I really liked his progressive version of America First. While I think he wanted the primary focus of his campaign to be affordability in the healthcare system because that's more in line with his expertise, I
That
think
wasn't his
that
first one.
that's what he wanted it to be, but it ended up being Israel because that
Yeah,
is, I think, in a way, like a lot of people are single issue voters on that topic nowadays.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think he
Instead of
had this
abortion, it's
very,
like don't kill
yeah,
babies in Gaza.
it's pivoted.
Yeah,
But I thought the way he answered that question is it was a unique way of responding. It's different than Mamdani. He focused more on it was this America First framing. He said his primary concern was that the U.S. was allocating money for like Israeli weapons that it could be spending on schools in Michigan or on healthcare in Michigan or on infrastructure in Michigan. And I do think that was a good way of one, sort of skirting the question without giving too much fuel to the media. I'm just thinking as a political strategist here.
yeah.
And then I also think it was a way to, bring the focus back to Michigan because I do think that's what a lot of Michigan voters are craving. I think Haley Stevens, I think that she didn't, I think one of the reasons why she didn't win was because she's already served the state of Michigan for about 8 years. And I think people don't see a lot of progress. And so I think they are kind of craving someone who's going to focus and invest more in Michigan. And so I do think that messaging resonated. How will that resonate in the general? That's hard to say.
Yeah, well, that's the question. Where will the Haley Stevens voters go? Will they, even if they don't show up, it's bad for El Said probably. But where are the moderates and the independents and the Haley Stevens voters going to go? If they don't
Mm.
show up, it's bad for him. If they vote Republican, it's bad for him. He really needs to get all those voters to vote for him. Otherwise, I don't think he has a shot.
Yeah.
On the other side, the Republicans are kind of fed up with their party as well. They have the same feelings about, the Iran war and maybe not as much Israel because you know, the Israel issue is overblown in my estimation. We don't really spend a lot of money in Israel, and almost every penny, 95% of the money gets spent back in the United States. It's kind of a lack of understanding of how the economy works. And some of his main issues, say like healthcare. Healthcare obviously sucks in the United States. I don't think anybody disagrees. It's kind of weird. Nobody really disagrees with that. The doctors don't disagree. The patients don't disagree. Even the hospitals and the places where people are cared for don't disagree. Nobody's happy except for maybe the insurance companies in the healthcare business. There's very few people that are happy. Let's put it that way. And patient care sucks. But how do you achieve a better, what's better, a better system? Just saying Medicare for all isn't reasonable. It's not a reasonable statement when you just say it, but people that don't understand business and don't understand the healthcare industry, don't understand that just saying that, doesn't mean that it can just happen. Like boom, you snap your fingers and it just happens. So there's a lot that would have to go into a healthcare system to make it way better. And there are countries that have way better healthcare systems and they are able to do it. And so just but that's part of what people want. People want a better healthcare system. And Obama tried. You have to give Obama credit because he tried. And the thing about Obama is Obama said, this just has to be the start. He goes, this isn't perfect. This isn't, I don't even know if it's good, but it's the start. This has to be the start. And guess what? Nobody took it forward, not even the Democrats. So, okay, this is what's wrong. Let's fix this.
Mhm.
The Democrats didn't
Yeah.
want to ever admit anything was wrong. It's really bizarre.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a few things to say. One, that I think imperfection is the start of really any development in a nation. Even the founding fathers, our Constitution is one of the shortest constitutions of the developed world. And the reason why is because it was supposed to be very imperfect scaffolding to build off of. That's just
Right.
how things start. And I do think that one of my gripes with the Democratic Party is for some reason they have this quest for perfection that the Republican Party does not have. And that I
Yeah.
think is why Democrats are so hesitant to rally around their own candidates the way
Yeah.
that people on the right do. Even though Trump's approval ratings are so low, they've dropped again. They're at like 30,
Yeah.
he's at 32% or something
Yeah. I
right
know.
now. People will still rally around him because he is the person that the right put up. And it's just like
Right.
no one on the left would ever do that. People on the left drop someone over a single issue where people on the right will support someone over a single issue. And
Right.
that I do think will be a big barrier for El Sayed going up against
Yeah.
Rogers because I mean my one thought about that is one of the things that El Sayed did strategically against Stevens' campaign was he made a big focus on the campaign trail about Stevens taking money from outside sources, including APAC, and kind of indicating that that meant there's a quid pro quo there. I
Right.
do think he was able to spin her getting money from outside funds into something that was a positive asset for him. If
Right.
Rogers gets a lot of money from certain MAGA influences, maybe Al Saeed could put the same spin on that. I don't know how that would play though when you're going across party lines.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't. There's so many PACs besides APAC that these guys get money from too. It just cracks me up. And I've always found it interesting because the economy behind elections, because no one really talks about it. But I guess the biggest is Georgia. Georgia's had some huge elections where so much money's been spent because they have the runoffs, like those Senate runoffs. They've had several Senate runoffs where hundreds of millions of dollars are spent on each election, on each candidate, and that's all money that directly goes into the Georgia coffers, like it's money that goes directly into Georgia, right? And the same in Michigan. All that money that was just spent, goes directly into Michigan. It's a boon for the state. And I always joke that if I was the mayor of some city and when there was a close federal election, especially like for Congress or something, I'd be calling up both sides. Hey, it's close. You better spend more money. Then I'd call the other side and say, hey, it's close. You better spend more money because the money comes right into the city, right? It's only going to help you. And so it
Yeah.
cracks me up. So
I mean, I think that works well when the money is somewhat equal. Otherwise, you
well, no,
might risk
but the money goes
some
in no matter
censorship.
what. Well, it goes it. it's better for maybe the election, the purposes of the election,
Yeah.
but as far as the
For the
state's
city.
concerned,
Yeah.
the mayor's sitting back there going, "Oh, no problem, I'll take this,
That's true.
whatever," and or the governor, like, I'm sure Gretchen Whitmer was happy with the amount of money that was spent, because that's
Sure.
just money in the budget. That's the other thing is Gretchen Whitmer. So Gretchen Whitmer, who's very popular, she's popular nationally. Supported Haley Stevens, and I think that's what brought her so close. Maybe was Gretchen Whitmer's
Mm.
support, but it always cracked me up that that so much money is spent on some of these elections because it's positive. It's positive in an economic from an economic standpoint. From a political standpoint, it sucks being able to spend all that money. PACs being able to spend all that money, and that's what Citizens United made it so it's unlimited. You could have basically unlimited amounts of money being
Yeah.
spent on you, and social media makes it so money can be spent on you without anybody knowing. Also, and I think El Said wants to say it was outspent 10-1, and I don't necessarily believe that because I think there's outside sources in other countries that you can make bot farms and run social media campaigns that no one would ever know about,
Sure. I
and
mean, tracking is another issue in compliance.
tracking
But
is another issue.
I do have a question for you because I think this might be because I'm in law school and I'm just always trying to figure out the domino that kind of sets the other ones off.
Right.
But I've been thinking about, I've been trying to look at lessons from history to kind of point out, to try to study in what trajectory this election could potentially shift our politics. And I was reading about the 1991 election in Pennsylvania, when the state official named Harris Wolford, who was advised by James Carville, he upset his like much better known Republican opponent to win the special election in Pennsylvania by, promising to expand access to healthcare. And then this created a template for Bill Clinton's presidential campaign the following year. Now I'm thinking ahead to 2028, and I'm trying to think if Al Said wins, what elements of his campaign could be used as a template for the Democrats. Additionally, I'm trying to think what elements of Al Said's campaign, if I was an advisor, what would work for him in the general. So, for example, I'm thinking that if I was a strategist for Al Said, I would, say I would think what would win would be to like brand his Rogers as like sort of like a lackey of like Elon Musk, of like big oil, of big pharma or AI, and like highlight these connections, sort of what he did with Stevens' campaign between funds and their support for policies that hurt ordinary people. And I think that is like what I'm thinking. I'm projecting that he's going to play, and I'm projecting that could be a new strategy for the Democrats in 2028. I'm curious as to what you think he might play when it
Well,
comes
I think he's
to
gonna.
going
I
against
think he's
Rogers.
gonna continue. He's gonna
Mm,
convince people that he's not an Islamist. I mean, bottom line, that's I hate to put it in those terms, but he would really have to disassociate himself from Hassan Piker and the DSA, which
mm,
he says he's not a member of the DSA, but all the DSA candidates support him. They're all like he's one of them. So I don't know how he gets around that. Because, like you said, Michigan's a purple state. He's done a decent job of sort of doing that. I'm in Michigan. He has to appeal to the blue collar workers who didn't vote for him. And I don't know if he can. I'm not sure. He's not going to get the hardcore Republicans no matter what. And the hardcore Republicans aren't going to get any Democrat. I mean, the hardcore Democrats, the progressive Democrats aren't voting Republican. And that's the way the world works. Clinton brought an energy in 91 that, you don't to the presidency that, similar to Obama. They both brought an energy of young and old. They were able to capture like just we're moving forward, and El Said has some of the same credentials as Clinton. They're both Rhodes Scholars, really smart
mm.
guys, went to prominent universities, and fresh ideas. What you thought of as fresh ideas. Bill Clinton was running against George Bush Sr., who was thought of as kind of out of touch at the time. He became president. Ronald Reagan, who brought kind of the Trump enthusiasm. He was a celebrity, an actor. He was governor of California, but he was a very like rah rah guy. He could really bring in the rah rah, and people really liked that. We love America. He got people very patriotic and very American. Trump, he did it on both sides though. Reagan. He got
Mhm.
both Democrats and Republicans fired up about being American. And the 80s were great times. I mean, I have to admit, the 80s were great times. Ronald Reagan, even though as a Democrat, Ronald Reagan did a great job of aligning the country, getting the
Mhm.
whole country behind, various policies, various ways of thinking. And so George Bush kind of won off of that momentum because he was the vice president. And then in his presidency, he was kind of looked at as out of touch. He hadn't been in a grocery store in like 10 years or something. So he had never even checked out of a line in a grocery store. There was a big deal made about that somehow. And so Clinton was able to capture, he was basically able to build on that, that this guy's too old, too out of touch. And, I have all these new, fresh ideas, including healthcare. And Clinton worked on healthcare really hard and never got anything across the finish line on healthcare. He really tried, though. Hillary was a big part of trying on a healthcare plan in his 8 years. And they never got anything across the finish line, but it was something they always talked about. They
Mhm.
tried, they kept trying, and they kept trying, and it never
Yeah.
materialized.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
healthcare, I feel like, is one of those issues that everyone sort of agrees that they want it to be better, but what actually are you going to do about it? Is that's kind of what you're saying. Healthcare, it's one of those issues that might be insurmountable for one senator from
oh, for one
Michigan.
senator, it is
Yeah.
insurmountable. It's funny because healthcare. I mean, we could talk hours about healthcare, but it's kind of
Mm.
boring. You know,
Mm.
people
Yeah.
people want to say, oh, we need better healthcare, but nobody wants to talk about what it's really going to take. It's really funny to me. Like business in general, people don't have an understanding. It's one of my big beefs with the socialists. And I think we've talked
Mhm.
about this before, is a lot of these socialists, they look at businesses and they talk about the means of production, but they really don't have an understanding of how business works. They have no concept of how business works. And what they're proposing can't work based on how business works. And you can't really change business. No matter what, if you're talking about manufacturing as an example, people need to work. There has to be people to, who implement what it takes to produce anything, whether it's a clothing garment, an electronic device, whatever it is. People have to be trained to manufacture it. There has to be production lines, and I don't think and I don't think people understand what actually goes in to manufacturing, how many steps there are, how many things that need to be done. It's not brain surgery, but it's just
Mhm.
something you have to learn how to do. You have to learn the process, and there's so many steps and so many different people. I mean, I think I've talked to you about this, but just one piece of clothing. I don't think anybody understands, there's people that, you don't just make this piece of clothes. Somebody has to make the fabric. It's whole different process. Somebody has to make the buttons, whole different process, right? Somebody has to buy the materials to put it together, and then you have to cut it, sew it, put it together. I mean, we can go into the whole process. We could talk about the whole thing. My point is that there's way more to business than people think, and healthcare is no different. The business of healthcare is monstrous, and putting together a system where it's affordable and all the people involved feel like they're making enough money, that they're getting paid well,
Mhm.
and well enough to
Mhm.
live a decent life is challenging,
Yeah.
very
I mean, I
challenging.
think, and I think I think one of the issues with politics is that your platform has to be relatively simplistic in order to garner votes.
Yeah,
And so I do think that they're like having a very nuanced platform can be a liability for candidates. I do think, and I think that's one of the strengths of Trump's campaign was that it was pretty simplistic in a way that was easy to
right.
grasp and understand.
Yeah.
I think that,
Yeah.
one of what
Well,
sorry,
Trump wasn't trying to
yeah.
control
Mhm.
business. He just wanted business to come back. He thinks tariffs are going to make people come back and manufacture here. And he might be right in some areas, but other areas, people want, I always say this, people want cheap shit from China. Have I said that
Mhm.
before to you? And,
Yeah, you have.
and there's no way we can reproduce that here in the United States. Not at the price, not at the price that they can do it. And that goes towards, the socialist movement that wants people to be paid fairly. Does that mean just here in the United States, or does that mean in other countries as well? Do you want to pay people in a third world country the same, the same amount of money? Do they deserve to get paid also? Because if you want cheap shit, if you want affordability, you know, and you want it made in the United States, that's not going to happen. But if you want affordability and you want it made in China, then you can go get a shirt for $3 at Walmart, maybe or something. Even if you just said, hey, everybody's going to wear burlap sacks, right? That's not going to work either. If you're making them here, everybody's still going to want to get paid.
Yeah. I mean, I am curious, did you think El Said's messaging on the fact that he was still a capitalist was convincing? Because, I mean, I think he phrased it in a way that was still in this sort of progressive America First way, which he was talking about how,
I think it
you know,
was I
free,
think it was convincing enough to get a lot of the younger votes out there and to
but you don't
convince
buy it.
people and convince some people to go against the machine,
Mm.
and squeak out a win. I mean, obviously that worked. I don't know if he would have won if he said I was a democratic socialist. I would like to think at least that he wouldn't have won if he said that, and he knew that in a place like Michigan. I mean, it worked in New York City for Mondami, and it's worked a few other places, but we'll see how that message keeps messaging. Because the more some of these DSA people go on TV and say, yeah, we want to change everything. We want to abolish the Senate. We want to open the borders. We want to abolish prisons. We want to do it differently. That's going to scare people because it's kind of been proven not to work. I'm all for sending a social worker out to a mental health call, but in general, those calls could turn unsafe as well. It's just the message the DSA wants is not achievable in the United States, I don't think, and it's one of the things like how to if they're going to call, because a lot of moderate Democrats keep saying we're a Big Ten party, we're still a Big Ten party, and if you look at some of the 80-20 issues that Trump's going to definitely bring out in this election. He's already started. I mean, it's already starting, the 80-20 issues. But let's use biological men in women's sports as an example, because there's a Senate race in Massachusetts, a Senate primary race. It hasn't happened yet, between Seth Moulton. Do you know who he is?
I've heard
And
of
Ed
him.
Murkey is the senator.
Yeah.
This guy, Ed, I think his name's Ed Murkey, right? The senator
Yeah,
from
Ed
Massachusetts.
Markey.
He's,
Yeah.
he's 80.
Markey.
He's
Mhm.
80 years old. And Seth Moulton, who I don't want to, he considers himself sort of progressive. He's kind of rode the line between moderate and progressive. And he's an ex-Marine and he's been a congressman for a long time and in Massachusetts. And his whole campaign in Massachusetts is we can't have 80-year-old people in Congress. And I sort of agree with him, right? I think a lot of people agree with that, right? And this guy, even though this guy Ed Markey's a progressive, he's leading in the polls, and Seth Moulton was a likable guy, but one thing that Seth Moulton did was when they asked him about how his stance on biological men playing in female sports, he backed off it. And I'm wondering, like, why did you back off of that? Why would you back off? And is it to win the primary? Because it's in my mind, it's like not even an 80-20, it's a 99-1 issue. I don't understand. It's just, but it gets a lot of play in the press. It gets
Yeah.
play. I don't know how much you just turn on the main news feeds online, but it gets a lot of play. So there's a lot of players in the WNBA talking about it. And there's
Mm.
one in particular, Sophie Cunningham is her name, who
Hmm.
came out, against biological men playing in women's sports. And then you have Megan Rapinoe, you know,
Yeah.
who, guys like me just shake our heads at, like, what? How does she even have a platform? Kind of
Mm.
thing. She's like for it. She was like a superstar soccer player. I forget how many World Cups she won on the women's national team, and she was the star basically. And all of a sudden she retired, and now she's for biological men playing in women's sports. So there's a lot of media about it. So this guy Seth Moulton, he's softened his
Mm.
stance because I guess he feels like he's going to have to in order to have a
Mm.
shot against this guy Ed Murkey, Markey, however you pronounce his name. And,
Yeah.
and and that confuses me because I don't think people like that. I don't like people being wishy-washy. Nobody really
But
likes wishy-washy. I
mm.
think he should just stay on his stance and say, biological, I think the Democrats should come up with a policy. We respect everybody. There's no reason why someone who is trans shouldn't be respected. Everybody deserves respect, and have that stance. But at the same time, biological men playing in women's sports isn't the same thing, in my opinion. And I think most
Yeah.
people agree with that. I would say that's an 80-20 issue, 99-1 issue. And
Yeah.
I don't understand how Seth Moulton backed off of it. What do you think?
I think it's really interesting because I do think we might be at a pivot point in like the political culture where I think identity politics sold for a really long time. And I do wonder if we are pivoting now to people craving something else. There was Amy Acton, she's the gubernatorial candidate from Ohio. She was like quoted in a bunch of news articles this past week for saying that like everywhere we go people are longing for public servants again, and they're longing for like this hate and chaos and this vitriol and like purposeful pitting against one another to end. And she says
Right.
the issues like that like we need to talk about, 95% of the issues no one would really disagree on. It's and
Right.
those issues like tend to be like cost of living, cost of housing, educational costs, childcare, property taxes, etc. I
Right.
do feel like we are now at this precipice where people are unsure about how to deal with these cultural and like more social issues when they're asked about them. Because I do think what Amy Acton is saying is accurate. I do think people are a little bit jaded. People are tired of Trump's whatever flooding the swamp strategy. And I think then it comes down to these social issues with these that people keep getting asked about that tend to be make or break for the campaign, that I think people just flub because they don't know. I think they're getting fed stuff from their strategists. I think they're trying to stay in the race so they can focus on the 95% of the other issues. And I don't even think that people are even giving their honest opinions. I think this is like, it's a make or break issue, unfortunately, on the left. And I think people are just flubbing. Like they don't know how to deal with it or handle it.
When it comes to Amy Acton, what
Mhm.
is your generation thinking about that what she says? Because a lot of your generation, Gen Z, it seems like they want to burn it down. Maybe that's just the media, and maybe that's just the far left doing their thing. How does your friend group feel about it?
I think there is some truth to what you're saying. I do think that people in general, including Gen Z, are just pretty disillusioned with large institutions, public institutions. There is just a declining in trust across the board. And I do think people feel like they just can't trust what anyone says. That being said, I do think a lot of Gen Z craves, and I think a lot of just our society in general does crave some sort of return to norms. And I think, I don't know if you watched The Odyssey at all, but like one of the big, like, there was like a big political statement in The Odyssey, which is sort
I
of
haven't seen it yet.
like once there is a breakdown of institutional norms, everything sort of goes to shit. And obviously, that's
Right.
Christopher Nolan's interpretation. Like he added that in. That wasn't
Yeah.
really in the
Well,
original
it's
Odyssey.
a
But
common theme in history,
yeah,
though. When
and I
political
do think
norms
that's
are broken,
yeah.
everything kind of goes to shit. It's
Yeah.
history dictates that.
And I do think everyone in a way is craving some sort of decorum again. This is why I get so mad at Fetterman for not wearing a freaking suit. It's just like, can we
Yeah.
just have some norms and just like be polite in members of society? I think a lot of people are just craving some sort of
Right. Well, but
return
you
to
know
that.
what's interesting is over the last, I'd say, since 2018, or since 2016 when Trump got elected first, you had the rise on the right of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert screaming and yelling at whenever the president that was in power was doing the State of the Union speech, they'd be there screaming and yelling, and they scream and yell in congressional meetings. And then on the left, you had AOC, who led the way with her squad. AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib
Hmm.
and Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman it started out with, and now it's moving on to some other people. But AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene both, like when they're in these congressional meetings, in their committees, their committee meetings, right? When they're filming, they'll be filming. C-SPAN's in there, whoever's in there filming. Maybe there's some news channels. There's video of other Congress people telling them, don't look into the camera, look at me. AOC she'll be in a committee and she'll be looking at whoever's talking. And then when they call on her to talk, she looks right at the camera and talks to the camera and says, this is, blah, 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 right? That's not someone that's interested in helping, in my opinion. You know what I mean? And then people have called her out. They say, hey, Sandy, don't look into the camera, look at me. And there's actual videotape of people saying that to her.
Yeah. It's an issue with having these career politicians.
Efficient.
It's like you have to focus on your actual job, but then you also have to focus like on getting reelected. And so it's like
Right.
you're constantly splitting your attention and your
Right.
messaging, and it's just
Right. But she knew
I
exactly what she was doing. I mean, she's very deliberate and very smart about how she approaches that stuff. In my opinion, that's how she got elected. I mean,
yeah.
the part of getting elected and staying elected, she's really good at, really smart at. Actually, knowing politics, I don't think she knows much. I mean, whenever I
Yeah,
hear her
I
talk,
mean,
she fumbles her words. You've heard her. Everybody's heard how she gets caught without having answers and fumbles around, and that stuff she's rehearsed. Or when it comes to like what it takes to get reelected or elected or get garnish votes, she's good at.
I think she's a really adept and like tactful politician. I think she's,
Yeah,
I think from her background and the way she's been able to rally people people who historically haven't been super participatory in the
yeah.
electoral system. I think she's very adept at,
Yeah, she
and which is
found
what you're
a
saying. I don't know if you saw Tucker Carlson's monologue this past week, where he almost suggested a plan to bounce back from like the Vance disappointment and sort of like soft launch a run for the presidential seat in 2028. He didn't
Tucker
explicitly
Carlson.
say he was, yeah, he didn't
Well, he's been
explicitly say
saying
he would run,
people
but
think he's going to run. Listen, Catherine. A friend of mine who's a hedge fund dude,
mm,
right, told me months ago that Qatar is putting $5 billion. Now I don't have proof of this, but a guy who I respect told me this and said Qatar is putting $5 billion behind two campaigns for president. This is a few months ago. Tucker
mm,
Carlson and AOC. And
mm,
that's not a joke. They both
crazy.
and recently, and then I heard Chunk Uger talking about it a while ago. He said, "What if the presidency is the two nominees are Tucker Carlson and AOC?" And he was talking about it on his show. And then I heard some other people float it. And
Mm,
so he told me this before people were starting to float it. Now all of a sudden it's good. They're gonna try. He's gonna try. I
yeah,
mean, who supported him? Candace Owens supported him. So
that's
I
not
heard,
surprising.
I saw a clip of Candace Owens saying, "I'm not running for president, but I would be more than happy to back Tucker Carlson." This is a while ago. This is a couple months ago, I think I saw it. She said that
Mm.
at least a month, maybe two, where somebody asked her if she was going to run for president, and she said no, but I'm
Mm.
going to support Tucker Carlson. So it's not new.
Yeah. I
It's not
mean,
a new thought that he's been honestly. I don't see how he could get the Republican nomination. He's such a dweeb. I mean,
yeah. I mean, he's seeking his revenge right now. It was reported in the Washington Post this past week that Trump told the Post that, quote, at the end of the day, we need to elect JD. And so
yeah.
he gave his clearest signal that he wants JD
Well,
to
I've
be his
heard that he wants
successor.
his son. I've heard Donald Trump is going to be supporting Don Jr.
Yeah, the Post just reported this past week. So I'm not so sure based on what.
I can tell you the moderates, even moderate Democrats, love Marco Rubio. And the reason why people, especially in my generation, love Marco Rubio is because he doesn't lie. He's
Mm,
the only person that Trump nominated that got that had zero people vote against him for Secretary of State in the Senate.
mm,
He got approved by the Senate 99 to nothing. And the only reason why it wasn't 100 is because J.D. Vance wasn't a senator anymore because he got elected president and they hadn't replaced him yet.
well, I feel like Trump just wants a pawn as his successor. I think
Well,
JD
he's
Vance is
looking
more
to
or less
he's looking
proven
for
that.
his legacy.
Yeah, I mean, he's looking for his like, but I think he's also looking at the hand. Because I think if he could run again, and I think
Oh, if he could, he would.
if
Yeah,
he
he's
could,
still
he would.
mentally
If he
capable.
even could find a way to finagle that, he would. But I think his approval rating's too low for him to take that risk.
Yeah. Well, it
But I
just
will say
can't
this.
happen. I mean, it would.
Yeah.
It just can't happen. Every Republican friend of mine who voted for Trump, everybody I know says if he ran again, I'd vote for. They would be against it. No one wants to break that rule. Without.
Thank God. Yeah.
No one I know. Trump does. He jokes
Yeah.
about it.
Well, it's like once you break that rule, what rule do we have
Well, then,
left,
then it's
really?
then it's
Like,
everything's gone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I will say this. So Carlson's speech, I don't think it's been reported on that much.
No,
It
it
was like
hasn't.
90 it was like 90 minutes of like he's
Yeah.
outlining these 10 tenets or whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I thought was interesting is that he basically he spoke a little bit about that we need to do something about the pressing question of American identity. And he kind of ended his speech with these like rhetorical questions that was like, what does it mean to be an American? And basically like pointing to like messaging, like what will this messaging be that will win the American population?
Right.
And that's something that I found interesting even when watching Al Saeed's campaign because, of his family coming from Egypt, the way what it means to be an American nowadays is like certainly a lot more multicultural than it has been historically.
Still
And
60% white Christian
yeah, I mean it is
American.
shifting, and I'm curious as to like how that messaging will shift with the demographics as well.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of people crave the, America, Trump did it with America first, but really just, proud to be an American.
Mhm.
Because too many people, even people that are winning congressional seats and seats in whether it's city council or Senate, state local elections are winning that they say they're not proud to be American. That's a weird thing for boomers because we were raised on being proud to be an American, and now they don't teach it in school anymore. They don't
Mhm.
teach you to be proud to be an American in school,
Well, I
and
think yeah.
and it's weird. It's weird to
Mm.
it's a weird concept to whether you're just if you're old like me, whether it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. It's just kind of a weird thing. They don't teach you to be proud of America, to be an American. And
I do think. Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I
So
was
we
gonna
don't
say.
understand that.
I think the pendulum is swinging though. I think American Pride is coming back, and
And
I think it's
that and
coming
then
back
yeah,
in a
go
few
ahead.
ways. I think one. I do think you're right. Like I do think a lot of school curriculum shifted to give such a nuanced and complex version of American history that it does kind of come with there's some facets of American history. Like I think we're a bit shameful. I think to learn about.
Yeah,
But I also think that. And I think that plus, it was like growing up post 9/11, like there was just a lot of there I think people had like complicated relations with
yeah,
government, the government like increasingly so, I think throughout like the Gen Z childhood.
right.
But I do think I witnessed on TikTok a return to American pride on both sides. And I think part of that has to be with
You really
I've
see
noticed
that?
it a lot. I have, and I think I've noticed it a lot over the summer, during the summer months, because Europeans on TikTok will shit talk American tourists. And I have never seen Gen Z on the right and the left unite more in anti-European sentiment to be like, well, we have ice, we
Really?
have air conditioning, we actually contribute to the GDP, try defending yourself. Like I have never seen more of that than this summer on
Really?
TikTok. And I
Well, I
do
know
wonder,
the World Cup. The Europeans all
yeah,
came here for the World Cup,
yeah.
and they seem to really enjoy it here.
They
We're
really liked it, and
surprised.
I think yeah, and I love
We're
that. I think
surprised
it's
that,
great to have
and
American pride again. Yeah.
yeah. Well, is it coming back? Because I honestly I don't feel it. I
Mm.
haven't felt it. I don't see. Maybe I'm just seeing all the miserable souls that the socialists shit talking America. These kids that have everything. The view from the boomer side is like you see these kids and they've been given everything. Like you've had safety and opportunity and anything you wanted. Your parents gave you everything you wanted for the most part. Obviously, there's always people that have extreme circumstances, but for the most part, the people with the loudest mouths are the ones that were given everything, and and they're walking around with their phone and their computer and their $10 a day Starbucks habit and their whatever everything that you could want. And they're shit talking America how it sucks. I don't understand that. They have no respect for what America is and has been. And as far as America being multicultural now and how that's going to play out, I don't know. It concerns me because the Democratic Socialists of America political platform and states that they're against anti-white colonialism. They are anti-white colonialists, the DSA, and I don't know that that means giving all the land back to the Indians here. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
I don't quite know it, but it means they don't like it. They want it to be something else. They don't want America in my lifetime has been a Christian country. I mean, it is a Christian country, and the Jews didn't mind that because the Jews were given the same opportunity and freedoms, and the Jews don't try and convert anybody to Judaism. They're fine just, as long as they're free to practice whatever, their customs and traditions or whatever in their own way. The people that seem to come to America, this is the big beef that, I think is going to play out in the future is, and people talk about it a lot, is people coming to America and not conforming. When immigrants came to the United States, early on, everybody conformed. It didn't matter whether you're Jewish, Italian, Irish. There was all these sects of people that came here. Everybody conformed, right? Everybody conformed to America. Now, the black community had a different path because of slavery, and the slaves were freed, and it took a long time to, get to where they're at right now. I mean, that path was hard. We don't have to get into this whole civil rights movement, but the civil rights movement was a long road. But it's worked. In my opinion, it's for the most part worked. And is there still racism? Yeah, of course. There's problems, but there's things that still need to be worked on all sides too. It's not there's no just one side is wrong at this point. Because I'm a big believer in there's three sides to a story. Any story. My side, your side, and the truth. And
Yeah, I've heard that.
and but what is the responsibility of an immigrant coming to the United States to conform to basically what is a white Christian country? Because the Hispanic population certainly conforms, but they're mostly Christian, and so maybe it's all about religion. I don't know, but what does it take for people to conform?
Sure. I think like our country was founded on religious freedom. So I think it's important to,
Well, definitely
respect
separation
that
of church.
as a, yeah, I think it is important to be a separation. I do think
Of
that,
church and
elements of
state.
conformity and non-conformity are both important for culture. I think conformity is important for efficiency, for practicality, for all sorts of things.
Right.
But I also think like elements of nonconformity are like what make our culture unique and what make any culture a culture.
Yeah,
And
but
so
does it cause divide? The question is, does that cause
right. And
divide?
so exactly. And the question is what will that breakdown be? And then also at what point is like having a president that speaks for such a wide range of people and demographics that are shifting in a way in which it's even more multicultural. I'm curious, like at what point is like having is the like I don't even know like how a president could represent that. It's like an interesting.
Well, if you look at Barack Obama, right? I thought Barack Obama was a really good president. I thought
Mhm.
he did a really good job. I mean, the economy strengthened under him. I thought he approached the things that we're talking about in the right way. But the black community, he pissed off the black community and the far right. And the far right still, like some of the MAGA people I know, still hate Barack Obama so much because he tried to get people to conform and he pissed off a lot of people that I guess didn't want to conform. I'm not sure. But he didn't bend one way or the other ever. You know what I mean? He didn't like bend to the people that didn't want to conform, and he didn't bend to the people that didn't want a black man as president. He didn't bend either way. He stayed true to what he believed, which was kind of I don't want to say a moderate democratic position. And I thought that's what worked the best. I mean, he got elected twice pretty easily, and he did a good job as president. He was able to carry the United States on an international stage fairly well also. And the majority of people really liked Obama. He would get elected again. Everybody jokes about if Trump ran for third term, that means Obama could too.
Yeah.
And most people think Obama would crush him. So,
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if that playbook gets
and
reused. I can't believe it's like 20 years later now, which
yeah,
sounds
yeah, 20 years since he first
um
ran.
yeah,
And he had the same excitement.
wild.
Obama, maybe you were too young to remember, but
Mhm.
Obama in 2008 had the youth excitement. I remember friends of mine saying, "How much money can I give to Obama? How much money can I
Wow.
donate to his campaign? I want to donate as much as I possibly can."
Mm.
Kids your age, because I was, 20 years ago, I was in my 40s, right? So, but even kids that were in their 20s were, he had the youth movement down. That's how he won. He had them really
Yeah.
excited about, after, George Bush. It turns out George Bush wasn't so bad. He was actually kind of a nice guy, but he kind of he was run by the establishment. I think people
Mm.
that's sort of how Obama got elected also because George W. Bush was kind of the establishment guy. Like
Mhm.
he took orders from other people. People had that kind of impression, like he was taking orders from someone else, like Dick Cheney was really running the government or something, you know. And it's possible that's true. You know, I'm not saying that that's not necessarily true. And Obama was able to capture that on that. So that's similar to El Said, how he's like, you know, he's taking orders. You know, Haley Stevens is she's taking orders from someone else. That's, you know, that was kind of his mantra. And whether she was or she wasn't, I don't think she was personally, but that's what he used, kind of circling back to what we first talked about when I think about it. That's what has gotten the excitement for him is, you know, she's bought and paid for. She's not thinking for herself, right? So, and El Said's like, at least I'm going to think for myself.
That's such a good circular moment.
Right. I think we've talked enough. You know, comment, like, enjoy. Hopefully, we said something that helps out.
And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us a rating. Help us out.
Okay. Yeah, please help us out. We'll try to get better content, more content, things that we can sort of take in a direction that can actually help.
Yeah. But anyway, thanks, Dean.
All right, Catherine. We'll talk to you later.
Talk soon. Bye.